Today at the briefing, I've got a couple of staff members with me. Either during the briefing or afterwards, they'll be available to answer any of the more specific questions that you may have. Specifically, Captain Don Janes, who heads up our unit involving missing persons and sex crimes, and also Sergeant Brian Charette, who heads up our intel unit, who does all of our reports and background data and information to ensure that our checklists are adequately ran whenever we get a report of someone who's missing. Let me begin by saying that we called the press conference today because there's what we believe to be, and I say this with all sincerity, a little bit of a rumor that's spreading throughout our community that we're in this tsunami of missing persons. I want to assure everyone in our community and members of the media that we are not. After I give you a little bit of the data and the numbers that we deal with at the Escambia County Sheriff's Office, I believe that you will probably agree with us, excuse me, I'm sorry, that what we're dealing with here is something that we deal with on a daily basis. We average in Escambia County around 800 missing persons reports. That works out to be about 2.5 per day in Escambia County. Currently to date, we're up to 627 missing persons reports. Now that sounds like a large number, but let me break that down for you so we kind of put it in context. These are instances also of domestic violence, meaning that we have an individual, sometimes it's a female with children, who's in a domestic violence situation, and they reach out to the appropriate social services program. In this case, it would be, us, of course, starting with the Escambia County Sheriff's Office, but also institutions such as Favor House. And so what do they do when they go to Favor House? They're not allowed to have any contact, or requested, I should say, to not have any contact with any friends, family members, etc. Why? Because the maintenance of their anonymity and their whereabouts is critical. We deal with chronic runaways, meaning children who on more than one occasion have disappeared from their family. They're actually, in our system for the number of times that they've been listed as a runaway. We have we have adults. We dealt with 2 just this weekend. I would remind everyone that as an adult, you have a right or freedom of movement, meaning that if you decide to move to Houston, Texas this afternoon and not tell anybody that you're leaving, you certainly have the freedom to do that. We actually are working 2 cases right now of some that came in over the weekend, 2 adult cases where the one individual we contacted said that they had no desire to have any contact with their parents. Now, this individual was 20 years old. We can't compel you to call your parents. You have a right as an adult to do that. Another individual, basically the same set of circumstances. We've decided that we're going to sever all ties with friends and family for the time being. If you are not endangered, meaning that you're on medication or you're under psychiatric care, etc., we legally have no right to do a whole lot to you. We can request very kindly that you contact your family, to please let them know that you're okay. And of course, once we have verified that contact with you, we will communicate to the family that as of this moment today, in our speaking with you, we'll verify that your family member has been located, we've contacted them, and that they are safe. But those are a little bit of this criteria of this number that we have every year, and we're tracking, folks, this year just about the same number. We'll probably hit about 800 or so cases of individuals, that we get reports on that they are quote-unquote missing. Last night we worked a couple of cases that were solved within the first couple of hours, meaning that these were involving juveniles, by the way, with their parents. One instance was a little bit dramatic. A child had an altercation with the mother, a 14-year-old, got out of the car at a stop sign and left. Mother calls us, reports the child is missing. Within a couple hours, the child returned home. But we took a report, and so that goes down in our database as what? A missing person. And so that is added to every year the number of missing persons cases that we work. So I know the media has been inundated with these calls the last couple of days. The weekend was a little bit of a high volume, meaning that we had 8 come out over the weekend, of which many of those have been cleared. But to allay your fears at the media, we want to let you know that we too are attuned to this problem. And I would remind everyone, in the event that we make a bad call, meaning that we didn't marshal all services quickly enough or respond in a manner that the community thought was adequate or appropriate for this specific case, who bears the burden for that? We do. We bear the burden for that. So we always are reminding ourselves that we've got to make the right call all the time, and unfortunately in the business that we're in, we're going to occasionally make a bad call. But to date, we believe that we have not. We've very diligently followed up on all the cases, and some are of very unique circumstances. In those, we continue to work. If we have people that come up missing, and I will tell you that those are rare. Those are very few. The big thing now in vogue is, of course, human trafficking. Everyone wants to assume immediately that someone who comes up missing, especially young females, are involved in human trafficking. Those cases, by the way, are primarily and predominantly handled by our federal partners in that. Why? Because it almost always involves the transportation of people across state lines, or sometimes from one country to another, that are involved in the sex trade. As you know, the FBI with the Joint Task Force recently did one of the local massage parlors recently, and I believe out of that did stem a couple of cases that may be prosecuted for human trafficking. But we have not had a case yet in Escambia County that we could definitively say, since I've been sheriff, that it was a case of human trafficking, especially for the sex trade. And so with that, after the initial input, I'll answer any questions that you may have that I can. If not, I would say again, after the briefing, I'll make my folks available to you to answer any specific questions. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Of the 8 this afternoon, over the weekend, do you know how many, have they all been cleared?
No, they've not all been cleared. We still, I should tell you that it was 10 as of today. We added a couple before we came down to the briefing, but for you all, we currently have 6 that are still outstanding, so we've recovered 4. And of those, again, we're dealing with people who are, again, are chronic runaways, people that, again, just do not want to be found. And if you're an adult, those are specifically problematic for us. Homeless people are also a problem with this. We're dealing with a case here where one of the families was adamant that their family member be entered into the database. And by the way, we're required by law to do that. We have to put you in the database if a family member requests that. The old criteria used to be, we tell people wait 72 hours before we take a case. If it's a case where we believe that you're endangered, we've got a couple hours that we have to put you into the database. So, and that's entered into NCIC, and it goes out nationwide. So.
People say that you were saying like there's been a tsunami, or they think there's been a tsunami of missing persons cases. Have you guys been putting them out more on social media? How has that changed?
We have, and also remember, that's the upside and the downside to social media. It's a tool that we're still kind of wrestling with this. I think not only our agency, but most agencies in law enforcement. While the maximum amount of information, as you well know, we partner with you all the time in very complex cases or cases that have a lot of notoriety, and we ask for the media's assistance in getting these individuals out before the community, let everybody know that we're looking for these people, etc. And so that generates a lot of buzz. Of course, so much of that is bad information. I always remind people of a couple of years ago, a pretty sensational case that made the national news was the Boyette case, where they were eventually arrested through our contact with both the federal and state agencies, and they were arrested up in Georgia, in West Point, Georgia. During the time that we were working in communication with the authorities there, along with federal partners, we had received 2 calls in Escambia County. I want to repeat, 2 calls in Escambia County, definitive, eyes on, that they were seen on the west side of town. We literally had a SWAT team ginned up, was responding. While we were on the phone with the authorities in Georgia, they had been spotted by one of the billboards up there, and we had an eyes-on positive ID of that couple in that hotel. But yet we had one here in Escambia County. So we're basically working 2 responses at the same time. That's the downside to social media. We have to filter through information that is usable, information that is not. And again, we have to make a call that always errs on the side of caution. So that's the downside to social media. It's been picked up over the weekend. We have been trying to get up more quickly those that are 14 and under, which we believe are the most vulnerable for the children, 14 and below, whether there's any sort of any additional, I would say, aggravating criteria, possibilities of child abuse, et cetera. Why are they fleeing? Are they drug addicted, et cetera? We've determined that it really doesn't matter. If they're younger than 14, we've got to get them up. So the new norm will be you're going to see more of these posted by the Escambia County Sheriff's Office. Why? Because again, we're we're responding to the community. We're going to make sure that we get as much information out to our community as quickly as possible and do the maximum number of recoveries that we can.
And out of, you said an average of 800.
Per year.
Per year.
Per year.
What percentage would you say are chronic runaways? Do you have an idea?
Almost, the vast majority, I can't give you a specific number, but the vast majority of our reports are of juveniles, meaning those under 18. And many of those, and again, I'll use another case example that we're working right now. An individual 15 cut off their ankle monitor, and they're now reported as missing. We have a lot of individuals, even juveniles, who currently have active warrants out for them that are reported as missing because they've now left the area. Now, we can't under any reasonable likelihood expect what? For them to call us or report us. Or to get a friend or a family member to let us know. Why? Because if they report it, we're going to arrest them. So we're dealing with that situation too, even with juveniles. But the vast majority are juveniles with again, histories of being runaways. Yes.
Are 800 missing persons per year is that fairly typical for the population, a population size?
We believe so. I wouldn't do a comparison right now because I'd have to, pretty much decide, okay, throughout the state of Florida, and then I could even run the data nationwide to see if that's true. But when you look at all of the criteria that we deal with, while I have to say that you're a missing persons, there's a rational explanation for that. Again, the female that's avoiding another domestic violence situation who doesn't contact any family members. Why? Because they're in fear for their personal safety. So they're currently being sheltered at Favor House somewhere. So they're not going to call, but the family's wanting to get in contact with them. So you now become a missing person. But that's easily explainable, isn't it? You now have sought favor. We won't find out until much after the fact that that's occurred. So that individual's now in our database.
And people, I've seen on social media, they've been seeing all these photos, but I'm sure in your case you'd rather be safe than sorry and put it out there. If you can talk about that.
Well, yeah, that's an excellent observation, an excellent point, because we know we're going to hit a saturation point. Remember, pretty soon you just become part of the noise level. And so people, oh, another missing person, and they put it down. We're very concerned about that. I use the Weather Service as an example. While I applaud what they do, I also understand that if you hype every tropical depression or storm as the next monster hurricane, pretty soon I begin to ignore that. Because every time you come on TV, I've got a disaster looming off the coast of Florida. And so, again, it enters the noise level. And so now when the real storm is coming towards us, what do people do? We heard that, last month, that there was a storm coming. And so they put off preparing for the storm and put off preparing for the storm. And then we do get hit with a devastating storm, and it has devastating results from it. We are very concerned about that. But we're going to, implement this, new program, if you will, to see if it, bears enough fruit. If not, one of the natures of law enforcement is it's never static. The techniques that we used for investigation, et cetera, 10, 15 years ago, we don't use today. We add to it, we modify it. So we'll look to do that here.
You said that a lot of the missing persons were juveniles. What would your message be to parents who may have kids in that age range?
Well, I've been accused of beating up on parents a lot, so I guess I can get accused of it again. So many of our problems is as a result of poor parenting. Children are your biggest responsibility. Anybody that has children or grandchildren, I think, understands that. It's an enormous responsibility that probably most people don't realize, that have children, that I've taken on a lifelong commitment here, in addition sometimes to marriage. And when you allow children to raise themselves, or you're not a parent in knowing where your children are and what they're doing, then this is one of the results of that. So it is poor parenting, not knowing where your children are, or not seeking out the appropriate social services to help you. I tell people that are having issues as a parent, children, there's a great line from, a movie where they say, children don't come with an instruction manual. They certainly don't. But we've got a tremendous number of social services that do have instruction manuals for raising children. What do you do with children who are non-compliant? Those who exhibit aberrant behaviors very early on. And so as a parent, it's your failure if you don't reach out to these social services that we all spend a tremendous amount of tax dollars for to correct these problems if you don't reach out to that. If you can't solve it yourself, then you need help. And a lot of these children are in need of help.
Typically, do you have an idea of typically how long it takes you guys to solve missing persons cases?
Depends upon the case. Again, some are solved, we were discussing that. So many of ours that you used to never hear about, by the way, you're now hearing about them because, again, patrol is taking the initial reports, would be solved either on that existing shift or in the next shift. Most of them are solved just in a matter of a few hours. But now, we're taking reports and we're getting them up very quickly because we're erring on the side of caution. It's a different world that we live in, unfortunately. Any other questions?
It seems one of your main messages is that these are not children that are being snatched up at the grocery store. What can you say to
They are not.
these parents?
Well, I would tell, parents, it's difficult. We don't have a criteria that says a child is not important. And that's what we're dealing with here. I don't care if your child's ran away 20 times. If you call us to take a report, we're going to come and we're going to do the best we can to try to recover that child. But there are differences in children and the circumstances of their missing. Take just an example. Let's say that you're a parent who's never had a child that ran away. And so you're waiting at home after school and the bus stop is 2 blocks down the street and your child should be at home in 5 to 10 minutes, even if they stop and have a few discussions with their friend and they're not there. When you call, that's a tremendous red flag because your child has never exhibited those tendencies. Then we get a call from another parent who, when we pull up the report on the child, we responded to your home 10 times. Your child is a chronic runaway, has been so designated basically by Department of Child and Family Services. Hopefully we can get you into the appropriate program to help you. Those are 2 significantly different cases, aren't they? The likelihood of us finding the second child that just kind of wanders off after school and goes to this friend's house or to that friend's house, they're pretty much a wandering child, and we probably will find them. They're just holed up somewhere. Where the first child, who always comes home immediately, is the one that pops the red flag. Why? Because this is so out of the norm for this child to exhibit that sort of behavior. That's what sets off the buzzers and the lights and the alarms. So we have to handle each case on a case-by-case basis. But yes, that's your observation and assessment's accurate. We're not in this, again, tsunami of missing persons. This is the norm. We're just now putting criteria out there. And unfortunately, it's already started. I won't mention any members of the media that we've talked to here within the last day or so. But even some of your folks that report this have said, look, tell us the ones that are important because you're getting inundated with calls from people. So now you're feeling a little bit, I think, of what we feel. So you get 10 calls today for someone who's missing. Do you put every one of them on the 6 o'clock news? Probably not. So you're going to start using a filter. And who's the filter? Law enforcement. We've got a tremendous burden to bear on this. And we try to make the right call every time. It's an extremely difficult thing to do. Any other questions? Thank you all very much.